Welcome everyone to Half History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and last time I animated the morning preparations for the Battle of Shiloh on the second day. Now, let's look at Phase 2. One of the hardest fighting units on the Confederate side on the first day would also be one of the first units to see action on the second day. General Chalmers on the far right flank of the Confederate Army formed up his men and readied them to defend themselves. However, he knew that his flanks would be in the air. Nevertheless, he encountered William Bull Nelson's division crashing over the landscape. The rest of that flank was wholly unprepared. General Withers and others were preparing to march to the west to find their divisions and corps, but when they heard heavy fighting to the east, they countermanded their previous orders. Chalmers held the blue troops at bay until the other units could get formed. General Cheatham's troops had marched all the way back to their bivouac location of April 5th, but were hurriedly on their way to the front. Those brigades came online as the Union troops pressed forward. Chalmers fell back and formed the extreme right flank of the Confederate Army. Southern artillery placed on the outskirts of the Bell Cotton Field harassed the troops under Colonel Sanders Bruce. The artillery fired such effective volleys that Nelson sent a request to Buell for artillery support. In the quick movement to arrive at Pittsburgh Landing, many artillery batteries had been left behind, but Buell secured him 2 batteries to duel with their Confederate counterparts. All the while the battle raged on the Confederate right, Beauregard was attempting to reclaim the success from the previous day. He wanted Breckinridge to lead an attack in the center and drive back the approaching Federals. Likewise, he wanted the wings to move up in support. He informed Hardee, the now commander of the right wing, even though many of his units were on the left flank, to move up and support Breckinridge. The brigade commanders got their orders and moved forward. It became the impression from the couriers that the troops were not to fire because Breckinridge would be in their way. As they approached the tree line in the field, the blue troops waited until the rebels got nearly within point-blank range and delivered a devastating volley into the gray troops. This stunned the men and the commanders, sending many regiments to the safety of the trees. It was a debilitating mistake. However, numerous assaults would be made against the blue line, but eventually the Confederate right flank settled down in a defensive position. The Battle of Shiloh was turning into a stalemate, with neither side able to dislodge the other. The gallant Chalmers saw an opening to hit Amon's flank and hopefully turn the tide of the battle. He grabbed the flag of the 9th Mississippi and called for his brigade to follow him. The charge smashed into Amon's flank, pushing back the blue troops and forcing him to divert his attention away from the Confederate units in his front. Chalmers hammered Amon's line repeatedly. Buell found a few regiments to send to Amon's aid. The 2nd Iowa, the 19th Ohio, and the 40th Illinois rushed to the flank and halted the Confederates in their tracks. Nelson ordered his brigades to advance toward the rebel line. Bruce's brigades took some of the heaviest casualties attempting to cross an open field. Gallantly, they attacked the Confederates, and it broke out into hand-to-hand fighting in some portions of the line, especially when the rebels launched their own counterattack. A captain in the 2nd Kentucky described the fighting and his wounding. The shock of a musket ball striking one in the hip has about the same feeling as if a person is struck with a blunt instrument or club, and produces a paralyzing sensation, he wrote. He at first thought someone had hit him with a musket, and for an instant was rather angry at an imaginary assailant, but remembering that I had called out to a man in gray uniform who was pointing his gun toward me to drop his piece, as well as feeling warm blood running down my leg, soon convinced me that the Confederate soldier had not obeyed my order as promptly as I know my own men would have done. He later wrote, "My only fear for myself was that I would bleed to death, but by the use of a silk handkerchief, I stopped the outside flow of blood by pushing the soft silk cloth into the entrance and exit of the bullet." Bruce's brigade retreated to the north end of the field. Those 2 battle lines stared at one another. To venture across the field was suicide. On Nelson's right, Hazen ran into a problem not experienced by Amon or Bruce. The left 2 brigades had to advance southward to hit the enemy, but Hazen had to turn to the southwest, exposing his flank. His men were fighting over the wheat field that had caught fire the day before, and the position of his troops made them succumb to flanking fire. Bruce sent the 20th and 1st Kentucky regiments to Hazen's aid. Hazen sought to break the enemy line, and when William Smith's brigade came up on his right, he believed he had the power to do just that, and he readied his men. A private asked an officer to take what money he had on him and to send it to his family in the event of his death. The officer told him that he had just as much of an opportunity to die in this charge as the private, and instructed him to give it to the surgeon. Hazen ordered his men forward, and within minutes that same private was shot through the forehead. Smith and Hazen's brigade smashed into one another, not being properly coordinated. Smith also had the 14th Wisconsin of Grant's army in tow. The Badgers had encamped near Smith's brigade and without orders joined the advance of Buell's army. The blue line busted through the 1st Confederate line, capturing a segment of the Washington artillery. One Ohio regiment lost 4 color bearers in that charge. The second line of Confederates held on for dear life until Bowen's reformed brigade and elements of Stewart's brigade counterattacked. It was enough to drive off the Federals. As the retreating blue troops made it to the wooded areas in relative safety from the rebel bullets, they reformed. The Southerners pursued, led partially by Hardee himself, who sustained a slight wound in the arm, but his jacket was riddled with bullet holes. They got hit in front and flanked by the reformed blue troops, who weren't given up without a fight, and pushed back the rebels. It was a near stalemate on the Union left, but the Confederate center, commanded by Breckinridge, was in the process of making their assault.